A teenager vanished during a school trip, leaving her mother desperate for answers. But 3 years later, her mom discovers a shocking clue on Google Maps that makes her blood run cold. The morning light filtered through the kitchen curtains, casting soft patterns across the worn wooden table where 16-year-old Emma Thompson sat, spooning cereal into her mouth. Her long brown hair was pulled back in its usual messy ponytail, revealing bright blue eyes, her father's eyes, that sparkled with unusual excitement. "Do you think they'll let us see the new cardiothoracic surgical equipment?" Emma asked, looking up from the exhibition brochure spread before her. Diana Thompson glanced at her daughter over the rim of her coffee mug, still dressed in her navy blue scrubs after a 12-hour night shift at Providence Portland Medical Center. "I doubt they'd let high school students handle equipment worth hundreds of thousands of dollars," she replied with a tired smile. "But knowing you, you'll convince someone to give you a closer look." Emma grinned, revealing the slight gap between her front teeth that Diana had always found endearing. "The OMSI exhibition only happens once a year, Mom. This is the closest I'll get to real medical technology until college." Diana nodded, sliding a plate of scrambled eggs toward her daughter. "Eat some protein, future doctor, and don't forget your lunch is in the fridge." The familiar morning routine continued as Emma gathered her things, shouldering her navy blue Lincoln High School backpack covered in stickers from places she dreamed of visiting: Paris, Tokyo, New York. Diana checked her watch. She should be sleeping after her night shift, but these morning moments with Emma were precious, especially since Robert had passed away 3 years ago. "Don't forget to text when you get there," Diana called as Emma pulled on the bright yellow raincoat she'd received for her birthday, protection against Portland's notorious autumn drizzle. Emma rolled her eyes good-naturedly. "I will, Mom. Love you." She paused at the doorway, turning back with a sudden seriousness that caught Diana off guard. "Thanks for working extra shifts so I could go on this trip." "Always," Diana replied softly. "Now go, or you'll miss the bus." From the living room window, Diana watched as Emma hurried to the corner bus stop, yellow coat bright against the gray morning. Her daughter turned once to wave, as she had done since she was 12, before climbing aboard the school bus. Diana couldn't know this familiar scene, one etched into the routine of their lives, would soon become a haunting memory. At the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry, the sophomore class of Lincoln High dispersed through the Medical Innovations exhibition. Ms. Patterson, the biology teacher, distributed worksheets as students clustered in assigned groups. "Remember, I want thoughtful answers, not just checked boxes," she instructed, her voice competing with the excited chatter of 42 teenagers. Emma, usually at the center of academic activities, stood slightly apart, her attention repeatedly drawn to her phone. She glanced at the screen for the third time in 5 minutes, her expression shifting between anticipation and uncertainty. "Everything okay?" Lily Chen asked, approaching her best friend with a concerned look. Emma startled, quickly pocketing her phone. "Yeah, just checking the time," she replied too casually. "Should we start with the cardiovascular section?" Throughout the morning, Ms. Patterson noticed Emma's unusual distraction. When the class gathered around an interactive display demonstrating heart valve replacements, something that would typically captivate Emma, the girl hung back, her eyes distant. "Ms. Thompson," Ms. Patterson called, "would you like to demonstrate the procedure for us? You've been talking about cardiothoracic surgery since freshman year." Emma blinked, refocusing. "Sorry, Ms. Patterson. Yes, I'd like to try." She stepped forward, but her usual enthusiasm seemed muted, her movements mechanical as she followed the demonstration. At 12:15, the lunch break scattered students throughout the museum's main hall. Emma sat alone on a bench near the entrance, her lunch untouched beside her as she stared at her phone. After a moment's hesitation, she stood, walked to the school bus parked outside, and placed her phone and backpack on her seat before returning to the museum. At 1:05, Ms. Patterson began counting heads as students reassembled for the afternoon portion of the visit. "Has anyone seen Emma?" she asked after going through the checklist twice. Lily frowned. She was sitting near the entrance during lunch. Maybe she's in the bathroom? Initial concern remained mild as two museum staff members checked the restrooms while students sent unanswered texts to Emma's phone. After 20 minutes of increasingly worried searching, Michelle Parker, the school coordinator, requested access to the security camera footage. The security chief led Ms. Parker and Ms. Patterson to a small monitoring room. "Let's check the main entrance cameras first," he suggested, rewinding the footage to the lunch hour. The three watched in growing concern as the recording showed Emma leaving the main building at 12:40, walking purposefully toward the parking area while occasionally checking her phone. The final footage captured her approaching a black sedan in the pickup zone and, most disturbingly, entering the vehicle without hesitation. The car drove away immediately, its license plate partially obscured by the camera angle. "Do you recognize that car?" the security chief asked. "Was she supposed to meet someone?" Ms. Parker shook her head, already dialing the school principal. No, all students were to remain with the group for the entire visit. At 2:30 that afternoon, Diana was taking vital signs from an elderly patient when her phone vibrated with the school's number. Excusing herself, she stepped into the hallway to answer. "Mrs. Thompson?" Principal Connie Walsh's carefully measured voice sent immediate alarm through Diana's body. "We have a situation involving Emma. She appears to have left the museum excursion. We've notified the police." Diana's world tilted. "What do you mean, left? Left how? Where is she?" Ignoring her supervisor's protests, Diana abandoned her station and rushed to her car. During the frantic drive to the museum, she called Emma's friends' parents, her voice increasingly desperate as each call yielded no information. Arriving at the OMSI, Diana found two police cruisers parked outside. Principal Walsh and Ms. Patterson stood talking with officers, their expressions grim. "Where's her backpack? Her phone?" Diana demanded, approaching the group. "On the bus," Ms. Patterson replied, her face pale with worry. "She left everything there during lunch break." Officer Jordan Perez, a woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, gently led Diana to an administrative room. "I need to get some information from you, Mrs. Thompson. Can you describe Emma in detail? What was she wearing today?" Diana mechanically listed facts: height, weight, hair color, distinctive features, while her mind raced with terrifying possibilities. "Emma wouldn't just leave," she insisted, her voice breaking. "She's responsible, cautious. She would never get into a stranger's car. Never." By 5 o'clock that evening, Emma was officially listed as a missing person. Detective Robert Callahan from the Missing Persons Unit took over the case, bringing Diana to the East Precinct station to review the security footage now downloaded and enhanced. "Mrs. Thompson, do you recognize this yellow coat?" he asked, pointing to the screen. Diana nodded, feeling her throat constrict. "That's her, that's Emma." Her eyes fixed on the grainy image of her daughter walking toward the unknown vehicle. "But she looks normal. She doesn't seem to be forced." That observation established the first theory. Emma might have willingly met someone she knew. The abandoned phone complicated this hypothesis. Forensic technicians examined the device, discovering that Emma had deleted her recent messages and browsing history, behavior that shocked Diana. While examining Emma's room on the third night of her disappearance, Diana found a photo hidden at the back of the sock drawer, a faded image showing her late husband Robert standing beside an unknown man, with handwritten text on the reverse. "The Thompson Brothers, 1997. But Robert had never mentioned having another brother besides Greg, who had died when he was a child. Diana stared at the photograph, her hands trembling in the dim light of Emma's bedroom. 3 in the morning, and sleep remained elusive as it had since Emma vanished. The faded image showed Robert, her Robert, smiling beside a stranger with similar features, the handwriting on the back unmistakable. The Thompson Brothers, 1997. Diana's mind raced. Robert had only ever mentioned one brother, Greg, who died when Robert was 12. Who was this man, and why had Robert never spoken of him? Morning brought no clarity, only the same gnawing anxiety that had become Diana's constant companion. Sunlight illuminated the dark circles under her eyes as she sat at the kitchen table, laptop open to a video call. William and Elaine Thompson's faces appeared on screen from their retirement community in Florida, their expressions guarded when Diana held up the photograph. "I found this in Emma's room," Diana said without preamble. "Who is this man with Robert?" An uncomfortable silence stretched between them. William glanced away while Elaine adjusted her glasses, a nervous habit Diana recognized from family gatherings. "Diana, dear, this isn't the time to," William began. "My daughter is missing," Diana cut in, her voice sharp with desperation. "If there's something about your family that might help find her, I need to know now." Elaine sighed heavily, exchanging a look with her husband before finally breaking the awkward silence. "Thomas isn't someone we talk about, Diana. He did things that destroyed our family." "Thomas?" Diana leaned closer to the screen. "Robert never mentioned anyone named Thomas." "We made a decision as a family," William explained stiffly. "After what happened with Thomas, it was better for everyone if we moved forward, as if he wasn't part of the family anymore." An hour later, Diana sat across from Detective Callahan in his office at the precinct, the photograph placed carefully on his desk. The detective's kind but tired eyes studied it before looking up at Diana. "I believe Emma may have been contacted by Robert's brother, a brother I didn't know existed," Diana explained, her voice steadier than she felt. Callahan nodded thoughtfully, turning to his computer. His fingers moved swiftly across the keyboard, navigating through databases. "Let's see what we can find." Minutes later, he turned the monitor toward Diana. "Thomas Thompson, born 1975 in Eugene, Oregon. Last known address in Nevada as of 2010. Diana stared at the driver's license photo on screen, an older version of the man from the photograph, with the same jawline as Robert but harder eyes. Why would he contact Emma now, after all this time? At Providence Portland Medical Center the following day, Diana moved mechanically through her duties, checking IV bags and monitoring patients' vitals. Her mind remained miles away, constantly returning to thoughts of Emma and the mysterious Thomas Thompson. Dr. Patel, her supervisor, found her staring blankly at a patient chart in the nurse's station. "Diana," he said gently, "your patients need you present. Perhaps you should consider taking a leave of absence. No one would think less of you." That evening, Diana knelt before the storage boxes in Robert's old home office, dust tickling her nose as she methodically searched through financial statements, letters, and photographs. Anything that might mention Thomas. 3 hours yielded nothing but sneezing and frustration. Saturday morning brought rain, typical Portland weather that did nothing to dampen the determination of the search volunteers gathering in the high school gymnasium. Colleagues from the hospital stood alongside Emma's teachers and classmates, collecting stacks of flyers bearing Emma's smiling face. "We'll cover Pioneer Square and the waterfront," announced a fellow nurse, organizing a group. "The mall team should focus on food courts and clothing stores that appeal to teenagers." Diana watched with overwhelming gratitude as the community mobilized, wondering if Emma could possibly know how many people were searching for her. Sunday afternoon, Diana sat across from Lily Chen at a cafe near Lincoln High. The girl's dark eyes darted nervously as she stirred her untouched hot chocolate. "Lily, if you know anything at all, that might help find Emma, please tell me," Diana urged. Lily bit her lip, finally meeting Diana's gaze. "Emma said she'd discovered something about her dad. Something she said you would never tell her." "What?" Diana's heart pounded. "What exactly did she say?" "Not much, just that she'd found out something important about her family history, and that she was talking to someone who knew her dad really well." Lily hesitated. She seemed excited about it, but also, secretive. Monday morning, forensic technicians set up equipment in Emma's bedroom, connecting her laptop to specialized devices. Diana hovered in the doorway, watching as they worked. "We're recovering deleted browser history and examining communication applications," explained the lead technician. "Sometimes deleted messages can be partially recovered, depending on the platform." Hours later, the technician showed Diana a preliminary report. She conducted multiple searches for how to find lost relatives and DNA tests for family connections. There were also visits to several ancestry websites. That night, alone on the living room sofa, Diana flipped through wedding albums, noticing for the first time how few Thompson relatives had attended their ceremony. Robert had always explained it as his family being small and not close, but now those words carried new weight. The following afternoon, Diana visited Emma's English teacher, Mrs. Winters, at her home. The older woman invited her in, offering tea as they sat in a sunny kitchen. Emma wrote a fascinating essay about hidden identities a few weeks before she disappeared, Mrs. Winters recalled, retrieving a folder. It was exceptional work, exploring how people sometimes create false narratives about their lives and families. At the precinct the next morning, Callahan updated his team in the conference room, Diana sitting silently beside him. "We believe Emma Thompson may have been approached by a previously unknown paternal relative. We're currently tracking all communication channels she might have used." That night, Diana lay in bed staring at the ceiling, exhaustion pulling at her, but sleep remaining elusive. When her phone rang just after midnight, she grabbed it with trembling hands. "Mrs. Thompson? It's Detective Callahan. We found records of a black sedan registered to a Thomas Walker in Nevada, formerly known as Thomas Thompson." Detective Callahan slid the photograph across the table to Diana. A traffic camera image from Interstate 5 captured the night of the disappearance, showing the black sedan with a partially visible Nevada license plate, and in the passenger seat, a silhouette that appeared to be Emma, seemingly asleep while the driver, whose face remained in shadows, headed north toward Washington State. Diana stared at the traffic camera image, her fingers tracing the silhouette in the passenger seat. "That's her yellow raincoat," she whispered, her voice breaking. "That's Emma." Detective Callahan leaned forward, studying the grainy photograph with practiced eyes. The timestamp matches. This was captured approximately 3 hours after Emma left the museum. They were heading north on I-5, just past the Washington border. The image, despite its poor quality, represented the first concrete evidence of Emma's movements after her disappearance. Diana couldn't tear her eyes from the shadowy figure driving the sedan, the man who had taken her daughter. "Can we enhance this?" she asked, pointing to the driver's face, mostly obscured by shadows. "See who's driving?" Callahan shook his head. "The angle's wrong, and the resolution is too low. But this is enough to expand our investigation significantly. This confirms interstate transport, which means we can bring in federal resources." The following morning, Diana found herself being introduced to Agent Special Montgomery of the FBI, a tall, methodical man with graying temples and a precisely knotted tie. He shook her hand firmly in the precinct conference room. "Mrs. Thompson, we have evidence of interstate transportation, which allows us to assume federal jurisdiction in your daughter's case," Montgomery explained. "I've assembled a specialized team to assist Detective Callahan." Within hours, the East Precinct's largest conference room had been transformed into an operations center. Maps of the Pacific Northwest covered one wall, with red pins marking confirmed sightings and yellow pins indicating possible routes. Photographs of Emma and Thomas Thompson were prominently displayed, alongside a timeline of events. In one corner, 3 FBI technology specialists had set up workstations, their fingers flying over keyboards as they worked to recover Emma's digital footprint. Diana watched them anxiously, hoping for any breakthrough. "Mrs. Thompson?" One of the specialists motioned her over. "We found something interesting in the recovered data from Emma's devices." On the screen, Diana saw fragments of conversations from a medical forum for aspiring doctors, a site Emma had frequented for over a year. The specialist pointed to exchanges between Emma and a user called MedMentor. This account contacted Emma approximately 8 months ago, initially discussing medical school applications and career advice. The conversations gradually became more personal. Diana leaned closer, reading portions of recovered messages. Your father wanted you to know about the Thompson medical legacy, and there are things your mother never told you about Robert's work. Cold dread settled in her stomach. Thomas was using Emma's interest in medicine to manipulate her, she said quietly, to create a connection to Robert. That evening, Diana collapsed fully clothed onto her sofa, exhaustion finally overwhelming her after days of minimal sleep. She jerked awake at 3 a.m. to the sound of her ringing phone, momentarily disoriented before scrambling to answer. "We've got a potential sighting," Callahan's voice came through, alert despite the hour. Security cameras identified the vehicle at a motel in Tacoma 3 days after the disappearance. They stayed for 2 nights before moving on. By mid-morning, Diana found herself being interviewed by a CNN reporter, the national media finally picking up Emma's story. She stared directly into the camera, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Emma, if you're watching, please contact me. I'm not angry. I just need to know you're safe. Whatever is happening, we can figure it out together." The following day, Diana and Callahan flew to Tacoma, where they met with Agent Montgomery at the Motel 6, where Emma and Thomas had stayed. FBI forensic technicians carefully processed room 23, collecting fingerprints, hair samples, and any items left behind. "They were here," Montgomery confirmed, showing Diana security footage of a young woman with newly cut and dyed hair walking beside an older man. Despite the disguise, Diana immediately recognized her daughter's distinctive gait. "That's Emma," she confirmed, her heart aching at the sight of her daughter's altered appearance. "She's trying to look different, but that's her." A technician approached Montgomery, holding up a laptop. "Sir, he used the motel Wi-Fi to access websites about obtaining false identification documents. He also searched for long-term rentals in multiple states." Back in Portland 2 days later, Diana sat across from Detective Callahan as they reviewed Robert's financial records, looking for any connection to Thomas. After hours of searching, they found it: a wire transfer of $75,000 to a Nevada account 3 months before Robert's death. Why would Robert send money to the brother he never talked about? Diana wondered aloud, staring at the transaction record, especially when he was so sick. The next morning, Diana visited First National Bank, where Robert had maintained his accounts. The elderly branch manager, Mr. Phillips, remembered Robert well. "Mr. Thompson seemed troubled that day," he recalled. "When I asked about such a large transfer, he just said it was a family matter that needed resolving. I got the impression he wasn't happy about it." That afternoon, Diana finally gathered the courage to call Elaine Thompson directly about the money. Her mother-in-law's voice quavered as she finally revealed the truth. "Thomas threatened Robert several times over the years. Robert believed that by paying him, he could keep Thomas away from you and Emma. He was protecting you both." Later that evening, Diana joined a strategy meeting with the FBI and local police. Agent Montgomery stood before a map of the western United States, red lines indicating possible routes based on sporadic sightings and financial transactions. "Based on movement patterns and purchases, we believe they may be heading southwest," Montgomery explained, tracing a path through Oregon, Northern California, and into Nevada. While Diana tried to process all the new information about Robert's past and Thomas's manipulations, her phone vibrated with a notification from her joint bank account with Emma. Someone had just used Emma's emergency debit card, which had remained inactive for months, to purchase 2 bus tickets at a station in Reno, Nevada. Diana's heart raced as she stared at the bank notification on her phone screen. The emergency debit card she had given Emma 2 years ago, untouched since her disappearance, had just been used to purchase 2 bus tickets in Reno, Nevada. "They're in Reno right now," she told Agent Montgomery, her voice shaking with urgency. "We can catch them if we move fast enough." Within hours, Diana found herself on an FBI transport plane heading south, Agent Montgomery reviewing tactical plans beside her, while Detective Callahan coordinated with Nevada authorities via satellite phone. The flight seemed interminable, each minute stretching as Diana imagined reaching Emma before she disappeared again. The tickets were purchased for a bus leaving at 8:15 tonight, Montgomery explained, checking his watch. We'll have teams at the station and at all possible destinations. But when they arrived at the Reno bus terminal, rushing through the crowded station with local agents, they found only disappointment. Security footage confirmed what Diana had feared. They were 48 hours too late. The timestamp revealed the bank notification had been delayed in reaching her phone due to a processing lag. "That's definitely Emma," Diana said, watching the grainy footage of her daughter, now with short dyed red hair, following Thomas toward a departing bus. Where were they heading? Las Vegas, an attendant confirmed after reviewing the records. But they departed the day before yesterday. 2 months later, Diana sat cross-legged on her living room floor, surrounded by maps, timelines, and case files. Her apartment had transformed into an investigation center. A massive whiteboard dominated one wall, covered with photos, routes, and questions in different colored markers. The couch, piled with blankets and a pillow, had become her bed. She rarely used her bedroom anymore. Her phone rang, displaying Agent Montgomery's number. Diana answered immediately, her hope fading as she recognized his apologetic tone. "Mrs. Thompson, I understand your frustration, but without substantial new leads, we need to reallocate resources," Montgomery explained carefully. "Detective Callahan will continue as your local contact and will immediately reactivate our team if anything concrete emerges." After hanging up, Diana added another note to her whiteboard. FBI scaling back, October 19th. The date marked exactly 2 months since Emma's disappearance, a milestone that felt like a betrayal of sorts. How could the world continue turning when her daughter was still missing? Every Tuesday evening, Diana attended the support group at Northeast Portland Community Center, sitting in a circle with other parents whose children had vanished. Paula, whose son had been missing for 9 years, Miguel, searching for his sister for 4 years, and Sarah, whose daughter had been found dead after 6 months. Their stories terrified and comforted Diana simultaneously, proof that survival was possible, even in this limbo of unknowing. Between managing the Find Emma Thompson Facebook page, which had gained 47,000 followers, and volunteering at the Missing Persons Hotline, Diana had created a structure for her days. She sifted through every message and tip, ignoring psychics who saw Emma in dreams, but meticulously following up on plausible sightings. One morning, Detective Callahan met her at a coffee shop near the precinct, his expression betraying his weariness. "Officially, the case has cooled," he admitted, stirring his black coffee. "But I'm still working it in my off hours. Something about Thomas's pattern feels familiar. I've seen cases like this before." Diana nodded gratefully, pulling out a psychological report Callahan had obtained on Thomas Thompson. "Subject demonstrates consistent manipulation patterns. Possible personality disorder with fixation on authority figures," she read aloud. "That fits with what we know about his obsession with Robert." 3 days later, Diana landed in Henderson, Nevada, her first solo investigative trip. She approached a dilapidated apartment complex where Thomas had once lived, showing his photograph to an elderly building manager. "Yeah, he lived here as Tom Walker for almost a year," the man confirmed, squinting at the image. "Kept to himself, always paid cash. Left without notice around 2 years ago." In a Las Vegas cafe the following afternoon, Diana spread her files across a corner table, connecting dots on a map that showed Thomas's frequent relocations throughout western states. The pattern revealed a man constantly on the move, changing identities and locations every 8 to 14 months. Before flying back to Portland, Diana visited a small private investigation office in Reno, hiring a local investigator to monitor specific addresses. "I can't stay here indefinitely," she explained, "but I need someone watching these locations." On her flight home, Diana clutched Emma's worn teddy bear, Mr. Bumps, that she'd found pushed beneath her daughter's bed. Silent tears fell as she gazed out the window at the sunset, wondering if Emma could see the same sky wherever she was now. Exhaustion overwhelmed Diana as her taxi pulled up to her apartment building. She was surprised to find Detective Callahan waiting in his car outside. He stepped out as she approached, carrying a paper bag. "Thought you might need company when you got back," he said simply. "Brought dinner." In her kitchen, they reviewed her Nevada findings, creating a new timeline of Thomas's movements and developing theories about his possible hideouts. Diana appreciated Callahan's dedication, his continued belief in finding Emma when others had moved on to newer cases. After Callahan left, Diana sorted through her accumulated mail, finding an unmarked envelope among the bills and sympathy cards. Opening it revealed a typed note. "Emma is safe for now. She wants to contact you, but he is always watching. Don't give up." Diana handed the anonymous note to Callahan with trembling hands, who examined it and then looked up with a cautiously hopeful expression. "There's a partial fingerprint on the margin, and something on the back you didn't notice," he said, turning the paper to reveal a series of nearly invisible handwritten numbers in the corner that appeared to be geographic coordinates pointing somewhere in the Nevada desert. Diana and Callahan huddled over a digital map in her apartment, carefully entering the coordinates found on the anonymous note. The system displayed a remote location 30 miles from any town in the Nevada desert. "These coordinates are precise," Callahan said, zooming in on the satellite view that showed only barren landscape and what appeared to be a single structure. "Someone wanted us to find this exact spot." Agent Montgomery had initially been skeptical about the anonymous tip, but the partial fingerprint analysis changed everything. When matched against national databases, it returned a hit, a partial match to Emma's prints from her student ID records. "We have concrete evidence now," Montgomery declared during a tense meeting at the FBI's Portland office. "This no longer appears to be a voluntary departure situation." The federal team that had been scaled back was quickly reassembled, with tactical units preparing for deployment to Nevada. 24 hours later, Diana stared through the window of an FBI helicopter as it flew over the stark Nevada desert. The landscape below seemed alien, vast stretches of sand and rock formations baking under the relentless sun. Each mile increased her anticipation and dread in equal measure. "We'll land 2 miles from the target location," Montgomery explained over the headset, pointing to a topographical map. "Ground teams will approach on foot to avoid alerting anyone at the site." From her position in the command vehicle, Diana watched through binoculars as the FBI tactical team cautiously approached a weathered trailer positioned exactly at the coordinates. The structure stood alone against the backdrop of mountains, a single dirt road leading to it. Agents moved methodically, weapons drawn, calling out federal identifications as they secured the perimeter. "Clear," came the radio call 15 minutes later. "Site is abandoned, but recently occupied." Diana's heart sank at the word abandoned, but Montgomery nodded for her to follow as they approached the trailer. Inside, evidence of hasty departure was everywhere. Dishes still in the sink, food in the refrigerator, clothes hanging in a small closet. "They left quickly," an agent observed, pulling on latex gloves to examine items on a small table. "Probably within the last 72 hours. An FBI evidence technician carefully removed a notebook hidden between the mattress and bed frame, handing it to Diana. "This looks like it might be your daughter's handwriting." With trembling hands, Diana opened the notebook to find pages filled with Emma's familiar penmanship. She sat at the trailer's small table, reading entries that broke her heart. Day 347. "He's becoming more controlling each day. Says it's to protect me. But from what? I'm starting to question everything. When I asked about calling Mom again, he got angry and said they would track the call and find us before we completed the mission." "What mission?" "He talks about Dad's legacy, but it's all so vague." Diana felt physically ill reading the entries that chronicled Emma's gradual awareness of her manipulation. Thomas had clearly been feeding her daughter elaborate stories about Robert's secret research and enemies who wanted to suppress it. Forensic technicians methodically collected fingerprints and DNA samples throughout the trailer, confirming both Emma's and Thomas's presence. One technician discovered a photograph hidden beneath the liner of a drawer. Emma, with drastically different appearance. Short, dyed red hair. Thinner, with a tense expression that broke Diana's heart. "She doesn't look like herself anymore," Diana whispered to Callahan, who stood beside her supportively. Outside the trailer, agents carefully examined the surrounding terrain. A younger agent called out after finding something partially buried near a scrub bush, a discarded prepaid cell phone. "This might give us something," the FBI's electronics forensic specialist said, carefully bagging the device. "Even damaged phones can sometimes yield data." Back at their temporary command center in a nearby town, technicians worked to recover messages from the phone. Diana watched anxiously as fragments appeared on the screen, cryptic communications about moving again and finding a safe place for the baby. "Baby?" Diana asked, her voice barely audible as she processed this new information. Montgomery and Callahan exchanged concerned glances. "There are consistent references to a pregnancy in the recovered texts," Montgomery confirmed gently. "We need to follow up on this immediately." The following morning, Diana and Callahan drove to Desert Springs Medical Clinic, a small facility in a nearby town identified from a receipt found in the trailer. Diana's mind raced with questions too painful to voice aloud. Was Emma pregnant? Was she receiving proper care? At the clinic, Diana showed Emma's photograph to the receptionist, who hesitated before giving a slight nod of recognition. "Dr. Winters might remember her," she said cautiously. Dr. Winters, an elderly physician with kind eyes, initially refused to violate patient confidentiality until Callahan presented the federal warrant. His expression softened as he looked at Diana. "She registered as Jennifer Walker, 19 years old," he said, opening a thin file. "She came in approximately 3 weeks ago for a prenatal checkup." Diana sat heavily in the office chair, struggling to maintain composure as the doctor continued. She was approximately 16 weeks pregnant at the time of the visit. Despite signs of stress and inadequate nutrition, both she and the baby appeared healthy. I prescribed prenatal vitamins and scheduled a follow-up that she never attended. While Diana processed the shocking news of Emma's pregnancy, Callahan's phone rang. The analysis of fingerprints found in the trailer had identified not only Emma's and Thomas's, but also those of a third person previously unknown to the investigation, Gregory Thompson Jr., son of Robert's deceased older brother, a cousin Emma had never met who supposedly lived on the opposite coast. "Gregory Thompson Jr., Diana repeated, the name foreign on her tongue. Robert never mentioned a nephew. Callahan studied the fingerprint report, his brow furrowed. 32 years old, works as a laboratory technician at Boston Medical Center. No criminal record, but his prints are in the system because he works with sensitive medical equipment. Within hours, the FBI had dispatched agents to Boston. Diana watched via secure video link as they approached a thin, dark-haired man leaving the hospital's research wing. Gregory Thompson Jr., his expression transformed from confusion to panic as agents identified themselves, his resemblance to Robert briefly stealing Diana's breath, the same jawline, the same way of tilting his head when listening. "I didn't do anything wrong," Gregory insisted in the Boston field office interrogation room, repeatedly running his hands through his hair. "Thomas said he was trying to reconnect Emma with her family heritage." Agent Montgomery pressed further. "Yet you didn't contact Emma's mother or local authorities despite knowing she was a missing person?" Gregory's shoulders slumped. "Thomas explained that that you were trying to keep Emma from learning the truth about her father's work." He looked directly at the camera, seemingly aware Diana was watching. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know what was really happening until I visited them." The next morning, Diana boarded a flight to Boston, clutching a folder containing everything they'd learned about Gregory. Callahan called as she waited at the gate. "Gregory's cooperating fully now," he said. "He might know where Thomas took Emma after the trailer. Be careful with him, Diana. He's another victim in Thomas's manipulation game." In Boston, Diana stood behind one-way glass, studying Gregory as he waited in a conference room. The physical resemblance to Robert was unsettling, like watching a ghost from a parallel life where her husband had lived to middle age. "Mrs. Thompson," Gregory said, standing awkwardly as Diana entered the room. His eyes were red-rimmed from hours of questioning. I'm so sorry. I should have realized something was wrong. Diana sat across from him, maintaining a composed exterior despite the storm of emotions inside. Tell me everything. How did Thomas find you? Gregory pulled out his phone, showing Diana a series of emails dating back 14 months. He contacted me through a professional networking site, said he was my Uncle Thomas, that he had important information about the Thompson family medical legacy. His voice cracked. My father died when I was 5. I barely remember him. Thomas was the first connection I'd had to that side of the family in decades. The emails revealed Thomas's elaborate construction, a complex narrative about revolutionary research Robert had supposedly developed and hidden from pharmaceutical companies that wanted to suppress it. Thomas had manipulated Gregory's scientific background and desire for family connection. He built this incredible story about how pharmaceutical companies were persecuting the family because of Robert's discoveries. Gregory explained, scrolling through message after message. It sounded conspiratorial, but he had documents, research papers that looked legitimate. I'm a lab technician, not a doctor. I couldn't verify all the medical claims. Diana leaned forward. When did you meet Emma? Gregory's expression darkened. About a month ago at the trailer. Thomas had told me his niece was helping protect her father's legacy. He swallowed hard. She seemed different from the photos I'd seen online. Quiet. When I tried talking to her alone, Thomas always interrupted. I started feeling something wasn't right, but he explained she was just processing the truth about her father. Back in Portland, FBI analysts were piecing together a clearer picture of Thomas's operation. They discovered multiple storage units rented under various names, containing falsified documents, birth certificates, driver's licenses, even medical credentials. Thomas created a complete alternate reality, explained Dr. Harris, an FBI behavioral analyst, to Diana upon her return from Boston. For Emma, this isn't kidnapping. She believes she's on a mission to honor her father. The pregnancy likely complicated things, creating another level of dependency. In the operations room, Diana and Montgomery reviewed a digital map with locations marked, last sightings, uses of fake credit cards, movement patterns all pointing southwest. He's running low on funds, an analyst reported, showing Diana a financial breakdown of the $75,000 Robert had transferred. The account's nearly depleted. He's been making smaller withdrawals, suggesting he's trying to make it last. A breakthrough came when an agent found records of nursery supplies purchased on a credit card associated with one of Thomas's false identities at a store in northern New Mexico. Based on all indicators, Montgomery concluded during a video conference between Boston and Portland, we believe they're establishing a semi-permanent residence in Albuquerque or Santa Fe. Thomas appears to be settling in, possibly because of Emma's advancing pregnancy and the child they already have. Before departing Boston, Gregory had shared old family photographs with Diana, including one with all 3 Thompson brothers as children. My father died when I was 5, he'd explained. Thomas was the only connection I had to this side of the family. I wanted to believe him. As the team finalized preparations for the New Mexico operation, Diana's phone rang with an unknown number. When she answered, the initial silence was broken by a voice she hadn't heard in almost a year. Mom, it's me. I don't have much time, but I needed you to know I'm alive. Then, before Diana could respond, there was a noise in the background, followed by the sound of someone taking the phone, and the call was abruptly disconnected. Emma? Diana clutched the phone, her voice breaking as the call disconnected. Emma, please call back. The operations room erupted into action, technicians scrambling to trace the call as Diana stared at her phone in disbelief, willing it to ring again. We've got a location, Agent Montgomery announced minutes later. The call came from a payphone at a gas station on the outskirts of Albuquerque. He turned to his team, suddenly energized. I want a tactical team airborne in 30 minutes. Local agents should secure the scene immediately. Within 4 hours, Diana found herself aboard an FBI jet bound for New Mexico, accompanied by Callahan and Montgomery. Her mind raced between hope and terror, replaying those few precious seconds of Emma's voice. She sounded different, older somehow, her voice carrying a weariness that hadn't been there before. "The recording analysis is complete," Montgomery said, passing Diana a tablet with headphones. "Our audio specialists enhanced the background noise. Listen carefully." Diana closed her eyes, focusing on the sounds beneath Emma's voice: distant aircraft, cars passing, and a distinctive mechanical hum. The FBI specialist had added notes identifying the aircraft noise as consistent with patterns near Kirtland Air Force Base, narrowing their search area considerably. "Local agents have reviewed security footage from the gas station," Callahan explained, showing Diana images on his laptop. "This was captured 13 minutes before your call." The grainy footage showed a young woman with short, dyed hair wearing loose clothing that couldn't completely hide her pregnant belly. Despite the changes, Diana would recognize her daughter anywhere. "That's Emma," she confirmed, touching the screen gently. "She looks so different, but that's her posture, the way she moves." At the temporary command center established in the Albuquerque FBI field office, Diana worked with local agents to identify potential locations where Thomas might have taken Emma. They spread a city map across the table, marking neighborhoods within a 15-mile radius of the gas station. "We're looking for a man in his 40s and a pregnant young woman who would have moved in within the last 60 days, Montgomery instructed the assembled team. "Rental records, utility activations, cash payments, anything unusual." Agents disguised as delivery personnel and utility workers began canvassing targeted neighborhoods, discreetly photographing suspicious residences, and gathering intelligence. Diana worked tirelessly, reviewing each report as it came in, searching for any hint of her daughter. That night in her hotel room, Diana packed a small bag with items for Emma: comfortable clothes, toiletries, an old family photo, and the small teddy bear Emma had cherished as a child. The simple act of preparing for Emma's return made the possibility seem more real than it had in months. The next morning brought a strategic briefing with the tactical team leader, Agent Ramirez. "We need to consider that Walker is potentially armed and that Emma may not cooperate immediately due to psychological conditioning," he explained, outlining the approach. "Our priority is ensuring her safety and that of the child." Dr. Levine, an FBI psychologist specializing in trauma recovery, took Diana aside after the briefing. "When we find Emma, she may seem distant or even hostile," she warned gently. "It's a normal response to prolonged manipulation and trauma. She may have developed dependent feelings toward her captor as a survival mechanism." Diana nodded, having researched Stockholm Syndrome extensively during the long months of searching. "I understand. I just want her safe, whatever state she's in mentally." A breakthrough came late that afternoon when surveillance agents photographed Thomas leaving an apartment complex in northern Albuquerque. They transmitted the images in real time to the command center, where Diana studied them with mounting excitement. "He's carrying bags from a baby supply store," she noted, pointing to the packages in Thomas's hands. "That means they're settling in, not planning to move again soon." A local real estate agent cooperating with the FBI checked recent rental records. "I have 3 properties rented in the last 45 days to couples matching the description, all paying in cash," she reported, marking addresses on the map. The team began narrowing their focus, establishing surveillance on all 3 locations. Diana insisted on being present when they found Emma. "She needs to see a familiar face, someone she trusts," she argued when Montgomery expressed concerns about her safety. "You'll remain in the surveillance vehicle until we've secured the scene," he compromised. "But you're right, your presence may help stabilize the situation once we've ensured safety." At dawn the following day, the tactical team took position around the 3 locations, communicating via secure radio. Diana waited in an unmarked vehicle near the most promising location, an apartment complex with recent reports of a young pregnant woman who rarely left the premises. "Building is quiet," came the report from Agent Ramirez. "Target apartment has lights on, waiting for visual confirmation before proceeding." Diana lifted the surveillance binoculars, scanning the windows of apartment 17B as directed. Her heart nearly stopped when she finally spotted Emma through a partially open curtain. Thinner, with different hair, but unmistakably her daughter. Then Diana noticed with a shiver of horror that Emma was holding in her arms not just an advanced pregnancy belly, but also a small child of approximately 1 year who had already been born. "It's a child," Diana whispered, the binoculars trembling in her hands. "Oh my God, Callahan, Emma has a baby." The revelation sent a shockwave through the tactical team. Agent Ramirez immediately pulled his team back for a hasty reconfiguration, gesturing for the vehicle containing Diana to retreat to a safer distance. "This changes everything," Montgomery said, gathering the team leaders in a nearby surveillance van. "We need child trauma specialists on standby and a complete adjustment to our approach." The discovery of the child added layers of complexity to an already delicate operation. Thomas Walker remained the primary target, but now the safety of 2 minors, Emma's infant and her unborn child, took absolute precedence. Tactical officers exchanged their visible tactical gear for more discreet equipment, while behavioral specialists quickly revised their communication strategies. "Walker has just left the building," reported an agent watching the front entrance. "He appears to be heading toward his vehicle. Standard pattern suggests he's making a grocery run based on previous surveillance." Agent Ramirez nodded. "This gives us a window. We'll intercept Walker away from the apartment while a separate team approaches Emma. Less risk of a hostage situation or someone getting hurt in a confrontation." Surveillance teams discreetly followed Thomas as he drove to a local supermarket 3 miles away. Diana watched the live feed on a tablet, her heart racing as the man who had taken her daughter nearly 2 years ago walked casually through the produce section, examining apples with mundane normality. "Subject is in position," came the terse update, proceeding with intercept. 2 plainclothes agents approached Thomas in the cereal aisle, positioning themselves to block potential exits. "Mr. Walker," one said quietly, showing his badge beneath his jacket. "Federal agents, we need you to come with us without creating a disturbance." Thomas froze momentarily, his eyes darting toward the exits, but the agents had anticipated this. A slight nod from the lead agent, and Thomas found himself efficiently surrounded, with no option but compliance. The arrest was completed without incident, shoppers around them completely unaware of the drama unfolding beside the breakfast cereals. With confirmation of Thomas's secure detention, the second phase began. Diana, Callahan, and Dr. Martinez, the FBI psychologist, approached the apartment door. Diana's hands trembled uncontrollably as the specially trained agent knocked firmly on the door of 17B. After a long moment, the door opened just enough to reveal Emma, her eyes wide with fear as she clutched the small boy protectively against her chest. "Where's Thomas?" she asked, immediately backing away. "What have you done with him?" Diana stepped forward, barely recognizing the thin, short-haired young woman before her as the vibrant teenager who had disappeared from the museum. "Emma," she whispered, extending her hand, "I've come to take you home." Emma retreated further into the apartment, her expression a complex mixture of recognition, confusion, and fear. "You don't understand," she insisted, her voice carrying an unfamiliar hardness. "Thomas is protecting us. There are people who want to hurt us because of Dad's work." Dr. Martinez stepped forward, her voice calm and non-threatening. "Emma, we're here to help. We can discuss everything in a safe place, with you and your child protected. Would you allow us to come in and talk?" Emma hesitated, her eyes darting between the 3 faces at her door and the child in her arms. Something in Dr. Martinez's professional demeanor seemed to reach her, and she reluctantly stepped aside, allowing them to enter. The apartment interior revealed the extent of Thomas's manipulation. The walls were covered with evidence, newspaper clippings that had been digitally altered, falsified documents, and photographs manipulated to support Thomas's elaborate conspiracy narrative. A timeline connected Robert Thompson's cancer research to fictional pharmaceutical conspiracies, all carefully crafted to convince Emma of threats that didn't exist. Diana approached slowly, her attention drawn to the child watching her with curious blue eyes, eyes identical to Emma's. "He has your eyes," she said softly. "Exactly like yours." While FBI evidence technicians documented the apartment, they discovered an elaborate surveillance system, hidden cameras and microphones throughout the living space that had allowed Thomas to monitor Emma's every movement and conversation, even when he wasn't present. "It's like he was always watching," one agent noted, removing a microphone from beneath the kitchen table. Classic control tactic. 2 hours later, Emma sat in the back of an FBI SUV with Diana beside her and Nathan on her lap. She stared out the window as they left the apartment complex, her expression torn between relief and confusion. The familiar landscapes of Albuquerque, her prison for the past several months, receded behind them as they headed toward a secure medical facility where both Emma and Nathan would receive comprehensive evaluations. Across town, Thomas sat in an interrogation room, his demeanor surprisingly composed as he faced the federal investigators. "I'm protecting the Thompson legacy," he explained calmly. "Robert wanted me to take care of Emma. She came with me willingly." At the medical center, doctors gently examined Emma while Diana cradled Nathan, the little boy initially resistant but gradually warming to his grandmother's soft voice and gentle touch. The attending physician emerged from the examination room with a cautiously positive assessment. "She's approximately 32 weeks pregnant, and despite the circumstances, the baby appears healthy," the doctor explained. "Emma herself is underweight and showing signs of stress, but no immediate medical concerns." While the doctors continued examining Emma in the next room, Diana sat in the waiting area with Nathan asleep in her arms, when the forensic psychiatrist who had evaluated Thomas entered with a grave expression. "Mrs. Thompson, we need to discuss something disturbing we discovered in Thomas's personal files. It appears he has been systematically drugging Emma with medications that affect memory and perception, possibly since the first days of the kidnapping." Dr. Herrera led Diana to a quiet consultation room away from the bustling medical center corridor. His grave expression sent chills through her as she carefully transferred the sleeping Nathan to a small cot in the corner. "We found a systematic regimen of benzodiazepines and other perception-altering substances in Thomas's personal records," Dr. Herrera explained, opening a file containing chemical formulas and dosage schedules. He administered these drugs regularly to Emma, disguised as prenatal vitamins and supplements, creating a state of heightened suggestibility and memory disruption. Diana struggled to process this horrifying revelation. "Is that why she seems so confused about reality?" "Precisely," Dr. Herrera nodded. "These compounds affect memory formation and critical thinking. They're partially responsible for her acceptance of his false narratives. The good news is that her current pregnancy forced him to reduce dosages, which may have allowed her moments of clarity, like when she made that crucial phone call to you." The medical team immediately initiated a careful detoxification protocol, closely monitoring both Emma and her pregnancy for any adverse reactions. Dr. Martinez, the FBI psychologist, explained that Emma would experience increasing clarity as the drugs left her system, but warned this clarity might bring its own trauma. "She'll begin to separate reality from fiction," Dr. Martinez told Diana the following morning. "But realizing you've been manipulated so completely can be devastating. She'll need extraordinary support during this process." By the third day, the changes in Emma became evident. She woke from a fitful sleep, her eyes clearer than they had been since her rescue. "Mom?" she called softly as Diana entered her room. "I remember the museum. I remember getting a text that morning saying to meet outside. I thought—" her voice cracked. "I thought I was meeting someone who knew Dad's research colleagues." Diana sat beside her daughter, taking her hand gently. "It's coming back to you now. The medications he gave you are leaving your system." Tears spilled down Emma's cheeks. "Sometimes I knew something was wrong, but then he'd give me my vitamins and everything would get foggy again. I'd forget why I was upset or what had seemed strange. During periods of lucidity, Emma revealed how Thomas had methodically isolated her, moving frequently to prevent her from forming connections with anyone who might help her. When she became pregnant with Nathan, her dependence on Thomas became complete. "I kept a journal," Emma whispered one evening, Nathan asleep in a crib beside her hospital bed. "When I felt clearest, I would write things down, hide them where he wouldn't look." FBI agents recovered these journals from a loose floorboard in the apartment closet. Diana read entries that broke her heart. "I know not everything he says can be true. Dad never mentioned secret research. But when I question things, Thomas gets agitated, and then I feel confused again." One entry from 6 months earlier was particularly revealing. "Thomas says we can never contact Mom because she's being watched by the pharmaceutical companies. But I remember Mom working at Providence Hospital my whole life. How could she be part of a conspiracy? When I tried to ask more questions, my tea tasted strange, and I fell asleep before he answered." Across town, Thomas underwent extensive psychological evaluation while in federal custody. The forensic psychiatrists diagnosed paranoid personality disorder with elements of grandiosity, a condition that had allowed him to construct an alternative reality where he was the guardian of the Thompson family legacy. Walker's obsession with his brother Robert dates back decades, explained the lead psychiatrist to Montgomery and Callahan. He created an elaborate delusion where Robert's conventional cancer research was actually groundbreaking work that powerful interests wanted suppressed. Emma became the vessel for continuing this imagined legacy. Meanwhile, Diana formed a tentative bond with little Nathan, who initially cried for Dada but gradually responded to her gentle care. She sang the same lullabies she had once sung to Emma, marveling at the boy's resemblance to his mother. As the drugs continued clearing from her system, Emma's emotional state fluctuated dramatically. Some days brought clarity and overwhelming shame. "How could I have believed him?" she sobbed during a therapy session with Dr. Martinez. "How did I not see what was happening? I should have been stronger." "You were a grieving 16-year-old targeted by a skilled manipulator who drugged you," Dr. Martinez reminded her. "Your survival demonstrates strength, not weakness." Other days, Emma defended Thomas, a classic symptom of trauma bonding. "He always made sure Nathan had enough to eat, even when food was scarce," she insisted to Diana. "He said he was protecting us." Dr. Martinez explained this cognitive dissonance to Diana privately. She's reconciling two realities, the conspiracy Thomas created and the actual truth. It's exceptionally difficult psychological work. The FBI's evidence recovery team continued analyzing materials from the apartment, discovering diaries where Emma had documented her experience during moments of clarity. These writings revealed her progressive understanding of her situation and deep concern for her son's welfare. 2 weeks after the rescue, Emma was deemed stable enough for transport to Portland, where she would continue recovery surrounded by familiar settings. The medical team prepared for the journey, carefully monitoring her advancing pregnancy. On the night before their scheduled departure, Emma experienced a moment of profound clarity while looking at old photographs Diana had brought, images of her friends, her bedroom in Portland, her life before Thomas. "I remember wanting to be a doctor," she whispered, touching a photo of herself in science club. "I remember who I was." Diana nodded, holding her daughter's hand. "That person is still inside you, Emma. Different now, but still there." In the early hours of the following morning, Diana was awakened by a nurse urgently shaking her shoulder. Emma had awakened with intense contractions. Despite being only in her 34th week of pregnancy, the doctors confirmed that the stress of the situation had triggered premature labor, and now Diana faced another crisis, as Emma was quickly prepared for an emergency cesarean section. The hospital corridor erupted into controlled chaos as Emma was wheeled toward the operating room, doctors exchanging rapid-fire medical terminology. Diana ran alongside the gurney, clutching Emma's hand until a nurse gently but firmly stopped her at the OR doors. "We'll take good care of her," the surgeon promised. "Wait here." Those 97 minutes were among the longest of Diana's life. Detective Callahan arrived, having been notified of the emergency, and sat silently beside her, occasionally squeezing her hand when her trembling became too pronounced. When the surgeon finally emerged, his expression held cautious optimism. "Both mother and baby survived. The little girl is premature, but fighting. 4 pounds, 11 ounces with surprisingly strong lungs." Relief washed over Diana as she was led to the recovery room where Emma lay, pale but conscious, a tiny bundle wrapped in a hospital blanket beside her. "I want to call her Hope," Emma whispered, her voice raspy from intubation as she touched the infant's translucent hand. "Because she gives me hope that something good can come even from the worst situations." For 2 weeks, their lives centered around the neonatal intensive care unit. Diana balanced her time between supporting Emma's recovery, caring for Nathan, who was gradually accepting her presence, and watching over tiny Hope, whose incubator became the family's gathering point. Despite her size, Hope demonstrated remarkable resilience, transitioning from breathing assistance to room air faster than doctors anticipated. "She's a fighter," the neonatologist remarked, "like her mother." When clearance for travel finally came, the unconventional family boarded a medical transport flight to Portland. Emma sat quietly by the window, Nathan secure in her lap, watching the landscape transform beneath them. The mountains and deserts of New Mexico, her prison for so many months, gave way to the familiar green forests of the Pacific Northwest. "It looks the same," Emma murmured as they drove through Portland's streets. "But everything is different." Diana had prepared for their homecoming, leasing a spacious 3-bedroom apartment in a secure building with keycard access only. The previous tenant's beige walls had been repainted in soothing blues and greens, creating a sanctuary untainted by painful memories. "This is our new home," Diana explained, showing Emma through the rooms. "You have your own space, a room for the children, and mine is down the hall. We can decorate however you want, make it ours together." Creating a stable environment for Emma's recovery became Diana's mission. She arranged for specialized trauma therapists to visit the apartment, established gentle routines for Nathan, and coordinated with healthcare providers for Hope's continued monitoring. Meanwhile, the legal case against Thomas Walker progressed. Despite his defense team's attempts to claim mental incompetence, psychiatric evaluations determined he was fit to stand trial. The evidence against him mounted, journals documenting his manipulation, the surveillance equipment, the drugging regimen, and most damning, Emma's own testimony, once she felt strong enough to provide it. Emma's healing journey proved non-linear. During intensive therapy sessions, she often broke down, overwhelmed by shame and self-recrimination. "How could I have believed him?" she sobbed to Dr. Wilson, her Portland-based trauma specialist. "I was so stupid." "You were a grieving teenager drugged and manipulated by someone who exploited your vulnerability," Dr. Wilson reminded her gently. "Your survival and protection of your children demonstrate extraordinary strength." Diana observed Emma with her children, noting the tender care she showed despite her trauma. Even on her worst days, when memories overwhelmed her or withdrawal symptoms flared, Emma maintained a protective gentleness with Nathan and Hope that revealed her fundamental resilience. "She's carrying this terrible burden," Diana confided to Callahan during one of his regular visits, "but she isn't broken." 6 months after their return to Portland, Emma made the courageous decision to testify against Thomas. Supported by her therapist and Diana, she faced him in federal court, initially trembling but growing stronger as she spoke. "He exploited my grief for my father to isolate and control me," she testified, her voice steady, despite Thomas's unnerving stare from the defense table. "He created a world of fear and conspiracy that became my only reality." Thomas Walker received a 25-year federal sentence without possibility of parole for the first decade. As the verdict was read, Emma watched without visible emotion, then walked from the courtroom with her head held high, Diana at her side. 1 year after the rescue, with Hope taking her first steps and Nathan developing into a curious, talkative 3-year-old, Emma and Diana founded Emma's Light, a non-profit organization dedicated to educating young people about psychological manipulation and predatory behavior. Operating from a small office space donated by the hospital where Diana had returned to work part-time, the organization became Emma's path toward transforming her trauma into purpose. Emma eventually resumed her education, not in medicine as she'd once planned, but in psychology, determined to understand the mechanisms that had allowed her own manipulation. Her professors marveled at her insight and commitment despite the challenges of single motherhood. 3 years after the rescue, Emma parked her car in front of the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry, the place where everything had begun. With Nathan holding her left hand and Hope her right, they walked toward the entrance. Emma paused briefly, glancing at the exact spot where she had entered Thomas's car, then took a deep breath and said to her children in a firm voice, "We're going to see some amazing things about medicine today, and afterward, I'll tell you an important story about how Grandma Diana never, ever gave up finding the people she loves."